This is a quick overview of stress and its impact on primary and secondary school-age students. There is a healthy amount of stress that propels students, as you've probably experienced yourself. However, sometimes students face copious amounts of high-level stress that can take a toll on their learning, health, and memory. This video will outline what this looks like, what common causes of stress are, and how you can help.
The idea is your brain, right, has a structure called your hypothalamus that responds to stress. And eventually what your hypothalamus does is it releases a hormone that will eventually tell your kidneys to release cortisol, your adrenal cortex, which is on top of your kidneys. That cortisol feeds back into your brain and can have all sorts of really powerful positive effects, like if you're really trying to remember something that's important, that's stressful that happened to you, but it could also have some pretty deleterious effects if it's kind of chronic stress over time.
Chronic stress causes non-coherent heart rate patterns, which produce non-coherent patterns in the brain. This decreases the brain's ability to process information. In other words, things don't make sense. Stress hormones also increase muscle tension, blood pressure, heart rate, and metabolism, as well as slow down the digestive process.
Some students experience stress because they belong to marginalized communities relating to race, class, language, gender, or sexual orientation. Their ability to pick up threatening information is already cued to be on alert based on past experience. Thus, these students can experience classroom stress more frequently.
About 65% of our students are either immigrants or refugees. So if they're refugees, that often means that their families were in refugee camps, and maybe they were even born in a refugee camp, and that means that they probably were subject to a lot of trauma. And most of our families, over 95%, are living in poverty, so that brings with it its own set of challenges and stress. Maybe they don't have books at home, they don't have their own space, they don't have places to read or study, so there are lots of stresses.
There's a lot of academic stress that either comes from a lack of understanding of some of the content that the students have to get, or a lack of preparation and a lack of organization, which in the end turns into the student feeling overwhelmed and not knowing where to start as far as breaking down that stress. Fitting in and having friends and feeling like you belong is probably one of the most important things to students.
When students are stressed, their body is focused on the perceived threat, which inhibits their working and long-term memory and creates deficits in their intellectual abilities. The stress affects concentration and the ability to work with new information, whether that be in math, reading, or simply following instructions.
The main two ways I see that kind of manifest itself in students are one, just a complete shutdown of emotions, maybe not speaking, refusing to make eye contact with me, or giving me really, really short responses. And then the other one is kind of like the acting up, so being silly, purposefully ignoring my instructions, kind of scribbling all over their paper when they know they should be writing something.
Okay, usually I can tell a student is stressed out by the energy that they bring to the classroom. So oftentimes, like sad, typical things, right? Like sad face, or smiling, or like shoulders down, or head down. That's usually some initial signs. Sometimes you can counter that by being like, "Oh, hey, great to see you today. I love when you come to the classroom smiling." And kids are not smiling usually, then they smile. So that's usually maybe they're not stressed out. Maybe they're just having a bad moment. But further than that, it's usually like if they come to the classroom and put their heads on their desk, if they just really seem disengaged from reading or writing or whatever the activity is, that's usually you can tell when a kid is stressed out.
So some easy ways to decrease stress when you're working with a student who is clearly experiencing some sort of outside stress while working with you
is just to kind of build on a relationship you already have with the student, and sometimes that is a simple conversation of with like pointed questions instead of being like, oh, how are you, and opening it up to maybe a really big discussion, asking them specific questions either about how they're feeling or maybe what they might be struggling with in terms of the schoolwork or in terms of their personal life. I found that to be really successful, just having a quick conversation to build that relationship. And then also sometimes just like a little game, like a game of tic-tac-toe or something, to kind of remind them that while you are there to work with them academically, that you're also there for them as a mentor. And sometimes that just requires to have fun a little bit before you get down to working on whatever they're supposed to finish.
Also, like journaling and reflecting, which students will have a lot of resistance to in the beginning, but if you continually to ask them to do it, you make it a routine. Usually students find that as a safe place for them to share their feelings and what's going on.
You really have to be patient with the process, and you also have to realize that you will not be able to control or fix everything.
It's really a biopsychosocial model. A lot of these children have a different biology. They're going to be responding to stress differently. The psychology component is the piece that will change the way behaviorally that they respond to things in their environment, and the social component is the thing that you come in on, which is that you can help change both of those other components pretty dynamically over time.
And I try to make this classroom a very special place, a very safe place, so that when they're here, they feel loved and cherished. And I think that if they feel that way, then they will be more productive students and they'll be able to learn more effectively.